Our Stories Live is this show that I started that talks to people that are celebrating who they are just by being who they are and following their own path. And which is interesting that we delayed it a week because today is also the start of Mental Health Awareness Month, which I thought was almost perfect timing for you to be on here.
Serendipity.
I know. So, so for the folks that don't know who my guest is, it's Wels, and you are a mental health advocate. You created You, Me, Empathy, a podcast, wonderful podcast, and you started that in, I believe, January of 18.
That's right.
And what I love the most is you are a feely human.
Yay.
Yeah, which I love that phrase. I've never heard that before until I stumbled upon you. So I actually want to just jump right into what is a feely human?
That's a good question. I would say a feely human is someone who leads with their heart, someone who does the work of looking inward and sort of emotional wayfinding, who is not afraid to be vulnerable, who is not afraid to talk openly about their feelings and sensitivities and crying, and just someone who's just sort of akin to matters of the heart and likes to talk about those things and yeah, I would say that's a feeling human.
Do you think a feely human is something that we should all aspire to be?
I think so. I think, you know why I think so? Because I think that when we are engaged in vulnerability and emotional wayfinding and sort of curiosity around our feelings, we grow as humans. We grow our emotional intelligence, which allows us to better connect with others and to develop beautiful relationships with
Mm-hmm.
others. Yeah, so I would say yes, absolutely. We should all be feeling humans.
I think all that sounds amazing and wonderful, but I also can imagine in any time of the world, especially today, I think it's difficult at times to be a feely human. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly empathize with that a lot. I think I am who I am because of the path that I've taken, right? You know, I kind of grew up in a place where I wasn't, it didn't feel safe for me to be who I was,
Mm.
the feely human that I was. And it took me a long time to get there. And so I know that there are certainly social constructs and artifices and uh, just certain things that we deal with as humans, certain struggles and obstacles that does make it difficult at times. But the great thing is, I think more and more people nowadays are being open with their heart and their feelings and creating safe spaces around the world, like you are, Christopher, to give people that judgment-free, safe space to just kind of go inward and ask the questions and be curious about what's going on emotionally.
One of the spaces that I really talk about, or at least one of the, I guess one of my strongest feelings is helping people to be themselves,
Mm,
to be who they are.
yeah.
And I think about this connection between feely human and I think there's a lot of connection to that about being yourself as well, or being who you should be. Do you also think that it's difficult for people to be themselves so easily in this world? So feeling human to me is about feeling vulnerable and open. But what about being themselves? Do you think that's also a difficult piece to show or to share?
I mean, I would honestly say that they're very much intertwined, they're very much part of the same thing. I would argue that um, to fully be ourselves, to fully sort of come to the fruition of like our self-awareness and self-acceptance and self-care and self-love and all these things that we humans need, like it does require that sort of feely human
Hmm.
curiosity. Like it does require that. Like I think we don't fully actualize unless we're doing that emotional work.
That's interesting. I didn't think about it that way. That's really smart. You know, you almost can't really be fully yourself if you're not really vulnerable and open and really feeling all those things.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah. So in your space, if I was going to, well, I'm going to use the words that you use on your website and also within the show. You focus on empathy, on vulnerability in those safe spaces for people and for yourself.
Hmm.
Why are those three things important to you?
Well, empathy, I think empathy is a power that can truly change the world.
Mm.
Empathy allows us to um, help others feel less alone. It allows us to um, connect with others. I believe like it is um, the goal of living on this pale blue dot is to connect with others. Like I feel like I feel that deeply, and I feel like that's a human biological mandate is to connect with one another. And I think empathy is a prime driver of that. Um,
Do you, can before you answer the next piece of that, do you feel like empathy, there's a lacking of it and that we need to help people learn that skill or see it?
I, I think I think that empathy is a learned skill for sure, and there is lack of it. Some places, some aspects of our culture, there's a lack of empathy, and I think that um, empathy should be taught in schools and things, and I'm actually working on some ideas for that,
Hmm.
um, but it takes boundaries. Like it's something that I've learned in even doing my show and through therapy and stuff. Like me being a helper person, wanting to help everyone and take it all on my shoulders.
Hmm.
You can't do that, right? Like that's admirable in a sense, but you're also like doing it to your own sort of detriment,
Mm.
detriment to your own mental health and physical health. And so there are factors of sort of owning empathy that require some learning and some adjusting and just some experience. So yeah, it's certainly I think lacking in some parts. It's a skill to be honed and I think constantly honed.
It's so interesting because when you just mentioned this, taking it all on, and there's this balance as well.
Yeah.
When I mentioned the skill piece, I didn't think of it that way. I was asking you more of the like it's like a switch on or off. Do I have empathy or not?
Uh-huh.
Versus what I think you just shared is an important point is that yes, you should have empathy, but there's also a better way to embrace it. So it's not your detriment as well. So I think there's a really important point.
Yeah.
So to get back to that, why that? Why vulnerability? Why safe spaces for you? Why those three?
Um, well, I think that as I mentioned earlier, sort of briefly, I feel like I'm 30. I'll be 38 this year, and I feel like this is the first time in my life where I'm sort of fully coming into my own as a human,
Hmm.
and it feels amazing. But I, with that comes like these things like empathy and vulnerability, and these things I've always had, but wasn't necessarily like intentionally mining and sort of crafting and honing and being deeply curious about. And growing up, it was like I grew up with a pretty violent father and two pretty narcissistic parents as a whole, both of which I sort of had to mediate their marriage. And
Hmm.
I was a deeply sensitive person who sort of just shut down. Like that was sort of my survival mechanism. And so coming out of that through many, many years of therapy and struggle and heartache and stuff, I've learned that empathy and vulnerability, emotional wayfinding, these three things are so core to um, growth and so core to my own personal growth and so core to my own personal self-care and mental health and just recovery and healing and recovery from the anorexia I've gone through and sort of my own depression and anxiety. And so like it's so clear to me that these three sort of tenets are a huge part of who I am. And I feel sort of universally core tenets of just wellness and recovery and health in general, you know. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did. But then how did you turn that, or maybe not how, why did you turn those thoughts and feelings into a podcast in 2018? Like, how did that happen, or the why?
Well, the simple answer is I wanted to create a space that I didn't have.
Hmm.
Simple as that. I wanted, like, I was learning that, you know, these things, these empathy and vulnerability and creating safe spaces for people was a huge part for me and a huge part of my own recovery. And I wanted to give that to others. And and as I started to kind of like mine that in my own life, I realized how challenging it was, but also just so illuminating of self and so illuminating of joy and like you know, there are sort of aspects of joy that I'm sort of exploring now that I hadn't before because I didn't have those components, you know. And so I wanted to give people that safe space because I know that I didn't have it growing up, and I know so many millions of others don't have it either, you know, and maybe still don't have it, you know. And so that's what Human Empathy is about, is giving people that safety to just kind of just be who they are uniquely and allow me to meet them where they are and listen and be present and empathize, you know.
It's interesting because if you look at the kind of the roster of the people that you've chatted with or you've connected with through the show, I mean, all walks of life, you know, so many different people and so many different stories. Has meeting these people or the show changed you in some way now that you can look at where you're at today versus when you started it?
Well, I've certainly, I mentioned the sort of like me being a type 2 helper person. I've certainly had to establish stronger boundaries for myself, you know. I listening to some of the stories, and some are heartbreaking, and you know, dealing with like real big T traumas, you know. And I think an important part of empathizing is listening, but not taking on all of their emotions. And so that's a thing I've had to learn. Really listening and being present and connecting with them and allowing them to share, but not taking it on fully. Also, I guess just, I mean, I've learned to communicate better. You know, I think like having a weekly show and I've recorded, I think I have like 73 episodes out and maybe I've recorded another, I have like 20 in the bank, you know.
Wow.
I've recorded a lot. So like just talking to people and, oh, one of the things sorry, I'm very rambly, but one of the things I learned early on was I would take too many notes up front and have like a, you know, just a big old thing, you know. And me being a writer is just like, oh, you know, I'm being super verbose, you know. And I realized like that was taking me away from being present, you know. So nowadays I have a few bullet points, and I intentionally try not to even look at them. I just say like, I try to be as present as possible, you know, and really engaged in their story. And so that those are two pretty key things that I've learned.
I resonate especially with that, the notes and the, you know, when I first started my podcast, it was the same. You know, I was just, all these notes, you know, I think one of the funniest moments, because there was so many of them. I mean, I tried to put it on one page if I could. And the problem was, in the moment, I was like, I don't know, it was too small, I couldn't read it. And I started to realize that, you know, if you're too prepared in that way, you do miss out on being in the moment.
Yeah.
Which is a powerful lesson with just relationships, right? Be in the moment, be listening for, cues and information and understanding and absorb. So I love that you brought that up, because it's almost like the behind the scenes of a podcast, but it translates to like real life relationships.
Totally.
Yeah.
And listening is just such a huge part of empathy, you
Mm.
know? Like, we have to be as present as possible to really be engaged with the emotions that they're relaying and how they're telling their story. We really need to be listening, as actively as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. You just talked a little bit about earlier about your story, with violent father and your both folks being narcissistic. You also write a lot about your journey with anorexia and just with mental health. Has your show and just the work that you've done in the last couple of years of being a helper, has that helped you at all with your story and your journey?
Uh, you know, that's a good question. I think it has. It's given me, we all kind of, I won't say we, I struggle with imposter syndrome and feeling like I don't. I mean, this sort of long gestating underpinning of my whole existence, Christopher, is recognizing that I don't deserve anything,
Mm.
love, joyful experiences, etc. And I think that's a result of like the narcissistic parents in my childhood. But so I bring that up because I'm validated by such beautiful people, feely humans within the Yumi empathy community all the time, and it gives me the courage to write more, to do trying to think creatively and do bigger and better things with the podcast. And
Mm.
I'm actually working on a business slash nonprofit concept right now, and just trying because and I've even like gone and done like little tiny little miniature talks, which I'm an introvert, so doing that
Yeah.
is a challenge. But like in this space, like I've gotten so much more comfortable with it, and I think it's because of the community of Yumi empathy feeling humans, but also there's the community of sort of mental health awareness people at large. They're all very supportive and kind and validating.
Do you find that, because I've seen some of your posts that mention this here and there, and I'm just wondering how this plays out for you, because you're the creator of this safe space, and so you are this helper, and you become kind of this beacon in the dark. I mean, that's what happens, because people hear this and they're like, yeah, I want to be part of that group and I want to be part of this community. Do you still, though, find yourself, having difficult moments, though, like in real life? And because you're this beacon online and you are very open about stuff, but we can't always be a beacon. We can also be ourselves and just have tough moments. So I'm wondering if these difficult moments still follow you from your story and from your past and just from today to day.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was gonna joke that like my life is all sunshine and lollipops, but like, what kind of life is that?
Yeah.
Like, we get sick of the sunshine and the lolly, and our teeth would fall out. So, yes, absolutely, I still struggle. I have clinical depression and anxiety, um, and I have struggle days for sure. And I think when I do, I try to be open about them. And I think it is important to recognize that point though, because like, you as you start to kind of build a thing and you're the person behind the thing, you're expected, and this is just probably just our own insecurities. We're like projecting this expectation from the group at large or society or whatever, but it's really not true. We're putting that on ourselves.
Totally.
So, for sure I struggle, and I think um, thankfully I've been able to kind of be consistent and never miss an episode, which is great. That's partially due to the fact that I record like nonstop, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's helpful. But yeah, for sure. Like we're all feely humans, Christopher.
How do you stay true to that in those moments, though? Like being true to yourself, like, because I think when you just tapped onto this, maybe it's us projecting those expectations.
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, right over here. That's me. Don't it?
Yeah,
I live and breathe some of that because I get in my own head, and I think, oh yeah, I should be doing this, and then I think, wait, I shouldn't have to do anything. I should
right,
do what I want to do. Um,
right.
but you set these expectations for ourselves. So I'm wondering, in the moments of those things, during a struggle, building all the things that you do, how how do you stay true to yourself to show up and really be just you? Like, are there things that you help remind yourself, or to, like, you check in with yourself in some way? Is it some sort of self-care thing?
Yeah, I think I remind myself of sort of my personal mission, which is to, you know, be curious about what's going on inwardly and to be vulnerable and to embrace empathy. So remind myself of that. Remind myself that I do deserve love. Um, that's like kind of a constant mantra of mine. Um, I think certainly attempting not to get caught up in numbers or any of that bull honky, being on social media and having a podcast, you think of like download numbers and stuff. And I I try to just kind of keep moving forward, and enjoying each conversation as I have it and just kind of keep going forward and trying to kind of learn from my guests and learn from each experience, each conversation, and try not to question it, too
Mm,
much, because I feel like the ethos of the podcast is very clear, and I don't want to muddy it with insecurities and these things that can muddy it, and just stupid cultural things that we get caught up in, like, oh, how many followers do I have? Like, how many likes did this get?
yeah.
All that stuff.
Or as you said, Volhanki, I think is what you said.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. It's
that's
true.
very perverse. So I was trying to be PG.
Yeah. I understand. Um, well, my last guest was not, so it's totally fine. It's interesting that you talk about that, because there's one thing that you said there at the end that caught my ear quite a bit, which was just trust it. Just
Hmm.
trust what you're hearing, what you're learning, trust where you're in, like from the guest and from the conversations. A question I was going to ask you actually was about, like, if you had some advice for folks, to how can be themselves, how to really retain who they are while even whatever they're going through, if it's a bad day or with depression, anxiety. But um, I'm wondering, beyond just the trusting, tr- I want to say almost like trust the process, but that's not it. It's almost like just trust in being in it, maybe, or trust of what you're doing. So let me flip that into a real question and ask you, yes, is there some advice that you might offer to folks about how to really be who they want to be themselves?
I think, you know, I think that sometimes, I think a huge part of it is allowing yourself to just kind of sit with whatever thing you're feeling and I think I had a tendency, in sort of when I was less healthy, to bring um influences in when they shouldn't be in, and I did that because I was afraid of really exploring who I was. I wanted like, it was like a distraction or something. And I think we need outside influences, of course, we need different perspective, but I do think there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done just on your own. So I would say try to be okay with just sitting still, with your thoughts and your feelings. Write them down, you know. Don't judge them. They are what they are. They're not facts. They are just what they are. And I think journaling and writing and those things are super useful and have been useful for me. I do think like certainly having um, small pockets of safety is super important as well. Like safety is a huge part of any sort of growth. So definitely having support systems,
Hmm.
people you can talk to, people you can be yourself with is important. Um, yeah.
I think your first piece of advice there is almost a scary one though. Like, like when you just said like, like be still, like sit in it and like, oh, like it's hard. I think people do like noise and they do like distraction because when you have to be in your own thoughts and really understand who you are, that's difficult because
It is.
it's doing the work.
Well, it's a life work.
Mhm.
I'm not saying I'm done with it. Like nowhere
Sure.
near. It's gonna be my whole life. Like,
Yeah.
that's that, one perspective could be that's overwhelming, but the other perspective could be like, oh, what beautiful curiosity I have ahead of me. What
Yeah.
what adventures I have. I like to imagine myself as like Frodo on a journey.
Yeah, I love that because I think you've probably heard me say this. I really think of everything as an adventure. Um,
Yeah.
Even after when I got this done, and you probably saw this post, the doctor at the urgent care, we were talking and he was like, he ends up telling me he's a writer. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
what can I read some of that stuff? He's like, sure, I'll mail you some of those. And I was like, what an adventure this was. I mean, it was a dumb way to get there. However, I was there,
Yeah.
right? And
There, and you couldn't change that in the moment, so might as well,
yeah.
you know, grok the fullness, as old people say.
As we say. Um,
As we
so you mentioned this earlier, just a nugget of it. You mentioned about you've been maybe looking into maybe what's next as a business or a nonprofit. So my question to you is like, yeah, what is next for you, me, empathy, or for you?
um well, I'm trying to do um more writing for like different organizations. I have some things coming up with Mental Health America. I'm doing some volunteer work for an amazing organization called Project Heal, which is an eating disorder awareness and recovery group. I'm going to be a camp leader at this Camp Heal, it's called. So, me being sort of well into recovery, working with campers who are early in their recovery. That's the sort of idea. So I'm trying to do more writing, get out there and do more volunteer work. And then on the business sort of nonprofit idea, I'm not ready to share like all the details of that,
Sure,
but
of
I,
course.
I just want like so like I feel like Uni Empathy is a thing that is um, it allows people to feel less alone. It allows people to engage with their sort of emotional intelligence and perhaps grow it. It allows people to learn from the beautiful experiences of others. Um, it allows people to engage in their vulnerability and empathy. And I want to do that on bigger and bigger levels. And I feel like I have some cool ideas
Hmm.
that would bring, generally the concept of the podcast into businesses, into schools, um, into, uh, even elementary schools. Like I want to like teach empathy and teach like how to be vulnerable and teach like how to wayfind emotionally. And like through the podcast, I've met so many amazing, bright people who like are mindfulness experts and yoga people. And like, I want to like create a collective of people. And that's all saying that. But like, because it's still like a ruminating sort of amorphous thing in
Sure.
my noggin, but it's going to happen, and I'm excited.
It almost sounds like it's full circle to me. Like you kind of want to teach people, these are my words, but it's almost like you want to teach people how to be feeling human.
Yes.
And you just want to find different ways to do it in different places.
Yeah.
Which is amazing because I think it's, yeah, I think that we need a lot more of that because the feeling human comes the empathy and all the other pieces to it. So that's wonderful.
And there's so many paths to that too.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can access that in various modalities through mindfulness, through yoga, through just listening to a partner, through tarot, through so many sort of aspects of life that we have access to. And so I want to kind of make it clear and consumable that can be possible through all these various modalities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, I just want to, I just thought about this and I wanted to tell people about how we met. And this is like a serendipitous, adventure-y sort of things because we did
Yeah.
not meet through your podcast. We didn't meet through my podcast.
Right.
You remember how we met, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you tell people like how we met? Because I just think that's fun and that just speaks to like be part of the adventure and be in it.
Sure. So my day job, I work for a beautiful human named Pat Flynn, who's like an online entrepreneur type guy. I had been sort of working with him sort of as we were an agency called Winning Edits. Now we're sort of his full-time team, freelance writers and editors, a bunch of us. And one of the products that we built with Pat and support is called Smart Podcast Player, which is a media player for podcasters. And I run support for Smart Podcast Player. And Christopher reached out for something. I don't remember why you reached out, but we connected through me supporting Smart Podcast Player and you being a Smart Podcast Player customer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll take it one step further. So we connected that way, but I didn't know who you were. I just knew that you were helping me. And then I end up on your Instagram page and I commented on your t-shirt, the not gender rolls, but cinnamon rolls t-shirt that I love so much. And you're like, hey, we know each other. And I thought, what a funny space and world. And I always remember that because that's one of my favorite ways that I've met somebody.
Yeah. No, that was, and I like that you commented on that shirt because I love that shirt too.
And I try to hunt it down for like a long time because I like specifically the version you have. So I've looked for it. But I wanted to share that just because I think, you know, you never know how you meet people and what that adventure is and what it means. But, you know, it's been, I don't know, a year or more. And now we're here live on Instagram talking about mental health. And I think that's wonderful.
It is wonderful.
Yeah.
Couple of feely humans.
Feely humans here. Well, for everybody that wants to know more about Known, you can find out at knownwels.com. And then if you want to watch more past episodes of Our Stories Live or hear My Big Story podcast, you can go to accidentalinformation.com. Known, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me, Christopher.
Absolutely. All right, we'll talk soon. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.